Welcome to our posts. Today, we will see stories of r/MaliciousCompliance. Church wants to sue me for a review. I'm from Germany. We are a very litigious society, so much so that businesses can sue individuals for writing bad reviews. In fact, per German law, it's up to the individual to provide evidence that what they wrote actually happened, or else the individual can be forced to take down the review and pay legal costs to the business. I'm a tradesman and did some renovation work for a church in a small town. The church did not pay me. I take 50% upfront, and the church had cheated me out of the second half after I had completed the job. The church only had one other review. I wrote a review stating that I had been cheated by the church. I promptly got a legal letter from the church demanding to take it down unless I wanted to be brought to court. The church could easily argue that they paid me in cash and I would be out of luck according to German law. Okay, I complied with their demand. I took down the review and posted a new one stating that I'm a tradesman, and the church threatened to sue me for writing a simple review. I also attached the legal letter from the church as an image in the review. Fast forward a few months, I received an angry call from the clergyman. He said my review had caused several tradesmen to either ghost him or ask him for complete payment up front. He claimed that I had cost them thousands and that I would burn in hell for hindering God's work. I then asked him, "What is your religion's founder's view on honesty, compassion, and forgiveness?" Cue a moment of radio silence, followed by him hanging up the phone. No legal letter yet, anyhow I can now substantiate my review. Next story. Thieving bully demands I take him home in order to give him my fundraising earnings. I comply, and it works out beautifully for me. I was in middle school in the 90s. I loved growing up then, and even though there were gangs in my area, I generally avoided trouble. One of my classes had this big field trip planned, and they had us selling chocolates to raise money for our trip. I was pretty good at it, and was selling at a good rate. I would take the bus public transportation to school, and my stop was about 2 blocks from my home. I got off at my stop one day with my box of chocolates, and there was this older kid around 16, 17, pretty big for his age, hanging out there. He saw me and came towards me. This guy is clearly a gangbanger. Payaso comes up to me and says, "Hey homie, where you from?" He was asking what gang I was from. It's not the first time I get challenged like this, so I just reply, "I don't bang man, I'm just a junior high kid." Payaso looks at my box of chocolates and takes it from me. "What's this?" I tell him it's nothing, it's something for school. He opens the box and sees a bunch of dollars in there. He grabs the bills around $15, my sales for the day, and takes a bunch of chocolates as well. "Tomorrow you're going to give me $20 more. If you don't, we are going to have a real effing problem." I walk away feeling scared and pissed off. I realized I'm going to have to pay back the lost money from my birthday money, and I definitely didn't want to give this guy any more money. I think about it and decide I'll get off at a later bus stop from now on and walk a little more just to avoid this guy. The next day, this is what I do. I stuff my box in my backpack just in case, and I exit about 2 stops later. I don't see the guy and think I have solved my problem. Then I get to the liquor store a block away from home, and who do I see but this overgrown idiot Payaso. "Hey man, you didn't forget about me, did you?" I said. "Look man, I don't have any money right now. I don't even have my chocolates. I left them at home." I shouldn't have said that. "Okay, let's go to your house and you're going to give me the money or something else if you don't got it." I begin getting real nervous. My mom is at work and my grandma is home. I definitely don't want to bring him home with her there. I glance at him and notice the tattoos on his arms. At this point, I saw the perfect opportunity for malicious compliance. I tell him, "I don't think that's a good idea. Why don't you just let me go man?" Payaso grabs me by the collar and says, "I tell you what to do and you effing do it. You understand?" I nod my head and tell him to follow me. Now it's time to give a little background. My neighbor that lived in the house next to mine was a veterano, a veteran of one of the biggest, most notorious gangs in the city. He was in his 40s and a real chill dude. He loved my grandma because she would often share plates of food she made with him and his wife, and he was fond of me because I taught his 8-year-old boy how to play baseball. His son had a disability, a problem with one of his legs, so most other kids wouldn't play with him, but I often did. Let's call my neighbor Og. Og always had a bunch of guys over at his house. He made sure they never caused problems, and they were all respectful towards my family in particular. Back to Payaso. The tattoos on his arms. I realized he was from the same gang as Og. I have a big smile as I'm walking home and Payaso asks me, "Why are you smiling, Pendajoidiot?" I say, "No reason," and keep walking home. As we get closer, I see a bunch of guys hanging out at Og's house. Payaso narrows his eyes, then smiles as he recognizes some of the guys. We get to Og's house and Payaso says, "Wait here, Pendijo, let me talk to my homies." Og is sitting on his porch and Payaso starts greeting some of the guys and then heads towards Og and greets him in a reverential manner. Og notices me and says my name, "Hey Op, what's up?" Payaso turns to look at me and I say, "Payaso told me to wait here. I have to go home and give him money." Og stands up and says, "Why do you have to give him money?" I say, "Because he told me yesterday at my bus stop that the $1.15 and chocolates he took from me wasn't enough, and I had to give him more today." Payaso begins to speak. "You know this kid Og?" Og gives him the scariest look I've ever seen and tells him to shut the F up. Og looks back at me and asks, "Is this from the chocolates you are selling?" I said yes. Og asks me how many chocolates I have left to sell. I say about 50. He tells me not to worry, Payaso is going to pay me for the 50 I have left, plus 20 for the day before, and an extra 50 for my trouble. He tells me to keep whatever else I sell. He tells me to go home and Payaso would be back later with my money. About an hour later, there is a knock on my door, and Payaso has an envelope and says, "Here's $120 little homie. I effed up. I'm sorry. Do you have Nintendo? I brought you some games." I just stood there stunned and thinking how I never would have guessed that getting robbed had so many benefits. I didn't see Payaso too many times after that, but whenever I did he would wave at me and never bothered me again. Next story. Dealership pulled bait and switch it cost them over $50K. The city I live in has extremely inflated vehicle values compared to the surrounding areas. If you buy the same car from a neighboring state, you can often save $3-4K without really trying. When I buy a new vehicle, which happens every 3-4 years, I always look in the surrounding states to compare pricing. This story happened about 5 years ago, and the malicious compliance is still ongoing to this day. I was shopping for a new car brand new, and found one that matched my specs about 12 hours away in a neighboring state. It was priced about $5,000 below comps. After looking up flights, there was a one-way direct flight that took me to their local airport for around $175. Plus the gas to drive back. I was looking at a total of maybe $275 to save $5,000. Absolutely worth it in this situation. I reached out to the dealership, negotiated a bit, and agreed on a price. I let them know that I would be flying in to pick up the car and offered to pay in full in advance of the flight. They told me that all they needed was a $1K deposit and that the car was considered mine. We signed a contract and I paid the deposit. And then I booked the flight for 3 days from then. First sign of things gone awry. When I showed up at the airport, the dealership was supposed to pick me up. This had been arranged in advance. A quick phone call later, and I grabbed an Uber to take me the 20 miles to the dealership with the promise of them covering that cost. No big deal either way. Second sign of things gone awry. When I showed up at the dealership, the salesman I had been speaking with asked me if I wanted to walk the lot with him to look at a few cars. Yes, cars. Plural. Questioning what he meant by that, we walked into the lot to see these cars that he was talking about. Were these some special type of gold inlaid, full self-driving, full self-flying Amaze mobiles? No, they were not. When I point-blank asked to see the car that I was buying, the one with Vin's eyes listed in this signed contract with a deposit on it, I was told it was no longer available. The salesman offered to show me similar cars, which would have been fine were we able to come to similar terms on pricing, but all of these cars outrageously priced, think $2K over MSRP instead of $5K under MSRP. Important note for later. There was never a mention or any paperwork, signage, etc. of any incentives for giving 5-star reviews. Fast forward 2-3 hours. I am now convinced this dealership never had this specific car on the lot, and that this was 100% a bait and switch gone wrong. The dealership was unwilling to sell me a similar vehicle at a similar price to our negotiated one. We were over $5K apart and were unwilling to pay the flight costs for this bait and switch scenario. A heated discussion ensued between myself and the GM where he told me to go ahead and leave a bad review, but that I wasn't getting any free money from him. I took an Uber to a nearby hotel and booked a flight back home for the next day. Total cost? Around $750. Cue malicious compliance. This dealership had an average Google rating of right around 4-5 stars and around 400 total reviews. Pretty solid for a dealership. That night, while I was sitting in the hotel room, I had some time to burn. I spent a couple of hours creating new email accounts just so that I could leave multiple reviews for this dealership. All said and done, I had left around 21-star reviews over the course of that night and then sort of stopped caring about the reviews. At this point, my focus shifted to recovering my lost travel expenses. A few days after getting back, I sent the dealership a demand letter for $750, which they promptly ignored. Since we had done the original contract with the deposit in both states, I was allowed to file a small claims suit in my state, which I did. The dealership never showed up to court, and I received a default judgment for $750. I did collect that, by the way. It took a few certified letters, a few phone calls, and about a year, but I did get a check for $750. As you can imagine, I was still not a happy camper. What they had done was wrong on so many levels. All of my friends knew the story of how I was bait and switched, and the fact that I flew to the dealership on a one-way ticket only made it that much worse. They had all left a bad review or two, but nothing more than a normal mad customer. Cue malicious compliance long term. I don't know how it started or how it ended up lasting as long as it has, but at some point I had some time on my hands and left a bad review for this dealership. Just one. Not two. Not three. One. In doing so, I noticed that all of the reviews I had left right after leaving the dealership were gone. Probably taken down for being fake, or because I had left so many at the same time and the dealership reported them. I wanted to make sure this dealership wouldn't do this to someone else. So the next day, I checked to make sure that one bad review I had just left was still there. It was, and since I was thinking about it, I went ahead and created another account and left another 1-star review. Fast forward 2-3 years. It has now become a habit. Every time I have a few minutes to spare, I create a new account and leave a 1-star review for this dealership. Their current rating: 19 stars with nearly 35K total reviews. I am personally responsible for at least half of those reviews. When you open the dealer's website, one of the large banners that flashes across the screen advertises $50 for a 5-star review, something about showing the review to your salesman to get a $50 Visa gift card. It has been this way since about a year after this bait and switch occurred, right around the time the 1-star reviews began to accumulate. Assuming I am responsible for half of their reviews, and the fact that the dealership only has 35K total reviews, they have paid $50 per review for at least 1,000 reviews, likely more than that. Meaning, they have implemented a policy to pay for reviews, have spent $50K doing so, and have still seen their average rating drop consistently since telling me to go ahead and leave a bad review. Next story. My husband cleaned the work bathroom. My husband is a very skilled outdoor tech for a big communication corp. He's been there 34 years. He was doing some online safety training in office. A 20-something inside engineer, Skippy, told him to go mop the bathroom floor. My husband refused, stating not covered under his job title. Skippy begged to differ, said the floor was muddy from the outside pig's boots and he is management, so he can order people to do anything. Not true, of course. Hubby got an idea, stated okay, he would go do it. He went into the mechanic area, grabbed the power washer, put in lots of cleaner and hosed the bathroom down, ceiling to floor, including the paper towel, toilet paper, magazines, and the crappy chair they stored in there. There is a floor drain, as this restroom is in the garage area. Skippy uses this bathroom as it is closest to his office. Husband went back to his online courses. Skippy went to the restroom and came howling at my husband about soap being everywhere. It was a huge mess, blah blah blah. My husband replied anything worth doing is worth doing right. If it's not cleaned enough, he'd be happy to put degreaser into the power washer and clean it again. Skippy had to answer to his second level and is now refusing to speak to my husband. Next story. Hand over all my tasks so you can get rid of me. Okay, a few years back, I was the contracts and supplier manager at a large company. Been there 25 plus years and had a lot of corporate knowledge, having worked in multiple roles over that time. Also was very well paid due to length of tenure and experience at the company. A whole boss gets hired and proceeds to get rid of people he doesn't like and hires his buddies into various roles. The workplace culture took a nosedive pretty quickly. I knew my time was limited as I wasn't in his inner circle. Seeing the writing on the wall, I started looking for and applying for other roles. The whole boss gets me in their sights and decides to get rid of me, looking to move one of his recently hired buddies to my specialized role. He doesn't even understand what I do, needing a lot of technical knowledge combined with contract and legal. He tells me he wants to move me onto an upcoming project and to finish off what I am currently working on and not take on any new work. Through all my contacts across the company, I knew there was no new project or even significant budget for one, but I'll do what I'm told. I wrap up my work and tell him I'm ready for the project. He says sit tight, it's not far away, and don't start anything else. So I sit at my desk, applying for other jobs and waiting. One of the jobs I applied for comes through and get an offer on a Friday morning. That same afternoon, the whole boss comes around and says the project isn't happening, and as you have nothing else on your plate, we will have to let you go. Yahtzee. I know there is heaps of work backed up and the crap is going to hit the fan soon when contracts aren't renewed, services cancelled, etc. I also know my employment contract and they will have to pay a generous redundancy because the boss told HR my role isn't required anymore. I say, okay, I guess you will have to pay me a redundancy too? Sure, he says, not knowing what he has agreed to. So I go through the redundancy process and at the same time accept the offer of the new job. Come my last day, I happily accept the $200K payout. His face goes pale when he hears of the amount, because it comes out of the team's budget, walk out the door and into the new job the day after. Love my new job, less stress, great culture, a great team, wish I'd left earlier, but then I wouldn't have got the payout if I resigned. 4 weeks later, I hear the crap is hitting the fan, and they advertise for a new person for my old role as no one knows what to do because apparently my job was easy. He didn't even ask me document what I did to hand over to anyone else. I hope you guys like this video. If you did, make sure like, comment, share, and subscribe the channel our posts.